Hello, everybody. I'm going live here on Zoom, and it's dialing right into Facebook. And I want to talk about the really interesting topic of epigenetics and the way that our pain, a lot of times our suffering, is not even ours, and yet we carry it. And a lot of people don't know this, but they are carrying things that keep haunting their lives, and it's not even their work. So the key is to get that healed and to rewrite the software so that we can not only heal ourselves, but to help heal our family. So I am doing this differently. I'm coming on through Zoom so I can use my computer and actually be able to communicate with you by drawing. So this is going to be good information. I hope you stick around. Hopefully I can see your questions as you come on. I'm going to try to look at it on my other computer so that I know that you're with me here. And I'm going to turn my volume off. And I should be starting. So let me share with you what is actually happening here with epigenetics. So there was a study that was done some time ago. In fact, I'm going to bring it up here in a minute and show you. But imagine this, that everything you're doing in your life, the reactions you're having, the experiences, the trauma, and the great joy, imagine that all this is coming into you from the outside circumstances, right? So we have circumstances all around us. We're having all this coming into us, our sensory overload sometimes, and all this information comes in, and our brain automatically will delete a lot of it because it's not needed. Other parts it's going to distort, and then it will generalize. But there's certain things that happen that actually we take in. And when we take it in, a lot of times because we think we're individual beings, we think we're separate in the universe, we don't understand that what we're taking in and what we actually allow to sit within us, and we dwell on it, and it goes in a loop where we keep thinking about it. We create the emotional impact. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's anger, maybe it's sadness, maybe it's a deep retching. All these things come into us, and because we are creators and because we're all connected, what it does is it basically is programming the cells and programming the DNA. So I want to share with you a little bit about this. So if you're coming into the group, I'm going to go over to the group right now because I know I'm doing it on the Authentic Elevation group. And if you're on the group, let me know that you can see me or hear me. Now, I might not be able to see it here on Zoom, but I will see it on the comments. I'm going to just shoot over there real quick and see where I'm popping up here. Okay, there it is. Wonderful. Okay, so I want you to understand that this is very powerful. So I began looking at this because I'm always researching, trying to find out how to elevate myself, how to become better in my expansion, not as a human being, because a human being is a very temporal being. As a human being, we are wearing this biogenetic suit only for a short period of time. What I'm looking at doing is expanding my consciousness, because the real root of who you are, the root of everybody is the same. It is consciousness. Energy manifesting itself in this beautiful grand dance in the cosmos. And this is who we are. It is your true nature. But what happens is, as we incarnate here on this planet, in this space-time of 50, 70, 80 years, whatever it is, we start to identify with our body. We start to identify with our name and our gender and our status in society and our eye color and our looks and our family and our wealth and our partner and our body, all these different things. And so in the process of going from an infinite being who was born on this planet into a biogenetic suit, we become somebody who becomes finite, connected into ourselves, anchored into a physical form, and then we start to believe that we are this physical form. And when you start to anchor and identify with something, you don't see the truth. You start to see only that in which you focus. Energy follows attention. So this is very powerful work. I hope you take a pen out, get a pad, enjoy. I would love you to engage on this. And I know with Zoom, it's going to be hard because nobody's on my Zoom. I did this kind of impromptu to give some great value to you in this room. But I want you to engage on the chat below, and you can type hashtag authentic elevation. And what I'll do is it'll notify me that you're watching on replay, and I will come back and I will interact and engage with you. So let me just share this with you. Really, really powerful stuff here. First thing, I want you to think differently, and I'm going to back this up with some science. My first question would be this: do you believe that you are separate from everybody else on the planet? Do you believe that you are separate from your family members? If you have a sibling, I have an older brother named JD. He's 7 years older than me. The question is he separate from me? My mom and my dad who passed away, are they separate from me? If you have children, are they separate from you? Your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, are they separate? Type in and let me know what you think. The other thing I want to say is I'm going to draw something out for you too that's going to be pretty cool. But I'm really having these profound awakenings as I move forward in not only my diet, my health, but also my meditation and my research. So I want to share with you something powerful. Did you know that human beings, even like lab mice, we take in information, and when we sit with the information, we actually pass it down to our offspring. So this is so powerful. We all have heard of genetics, right? So I have blue eyes, and I can tell you my background. I did the whole spit in the tube, 23andMe, I think it's called. And so they ran my DNA, and they told me, they sent me these reports, and they always send me these reports. And they said, you're most likely from Ireland and Scotland and English, and you have a little bit of French in you and a little bit of Belgian, but ultimately I'm Irish Scottish. And I kind of knew that, but they justified it. And then they said, you're typically going to be blue-eyed. And they told me everything about myself, really, without seeing my picture. And that's pretty powerful. But then what they started doing is sending reports about the diseases that I could carry. And am I likely a carrier for certain things, right? And everything looks really good except one. They said, you potentially could get late-stage dementia, okay? Now, I could take that. Let me just give you an example. I could take that information that's out there from the genetic testing, and I could go, oh my God, I am really high probability for late-stage dementia. Now, if I allow myself to believe that and to feel depressed and to feel sick about that, what I'm what I'm actually doing is I'm programming my internal DNA in fear that I might get dementia. And right away when I do that, it's no different than my body being the computer hardware in the universe. That's what it is. Your biogenetic suit, your body is a computer. That's all it is. Right here, if you can see it, this is your body. It is the hardware. It is not you. But what happens is you have software in there, which is the mind, right? You have software. And once you hook on to this idea that, oh my God, I could get dementia, then you start to put energy around it. Energy follows attention. And what it does is it actually sends a program into your DNA to flick the switch on that gene that causes dementia to become manifest. Now, this is not genetics. Genetics is our passed down inherited traits from our cultural ancestors. That's genetics. And you can't change that. It's just, you got genetics. You know, I can't change my eyes when I was born. It's just they're blue. That's just the DNA strand and what happened based on the chromosomes in my family. But here's what's real powerful, and science has found today, that what's even more powerful is your epigenetics. Epigenetics. If you've heard of that, type in yes. In fact, type in epi yes, EPI yes. And that way I know that you've heard of it. If you haven't heard of epigenetics, basically they're discovering, very profoundly by the way, that what you think about and what you feel actually is like your keyboards on the hand of a computer programming your DNA, which is so powerful because that means you can change your life. You can actually express new genes in your body. You can actually create healings. You can actually do things that we never imagined that could be done through science. Today, all the science I learned when I was in school is being disproven. I remember when they said it was a fact or this is science, and you're finding out it was all bullshit. But today you can see it's amazing. So let me show you a study here. I'm going to share my screen with you briefly. And I want to show you this article. Now, I talk about this in my seminars, and you can see it right here. Let me stretch this out here. So what this shows, and this is from Scientific America, okay? It says fearful memories passed down to mouse descendants. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want you to know that the scientists, certain fears can be inherited through generations, provocative study of mice. So what they did is they took some lab mice, and every time they had them smell cherry blossoms, and every time the lab mice would smell a cherry blossom, they would be electrocuted. So the anchor became cherry blossom, which smells good, and mice usually like the smell. All of a sudden, that smell becomes a trigger to fear and pain. And after they did this multiple times, and the lab mice automatically, when they smelled the smell, they would instantly go into fear and panic, very much like Pavlov's dog, if you remember that study in high school, where they said Pavlov would ring a bell and cause the dog to salivate because every time he rang the bell, the dog would get fed. And then they stopped bringing the food, but the dog would still salivate. This is what's happened with mice. Now, the interesting thing that comes of this study, and you can go look it up, is that you can go down now when the lab mice had their offspring, 1, 2, 3 generations, the actual babies born had a natural fear when they smelled cherry blossoms. That means the program went deep into the DNA. It encoded fear into the DNA, and it actually created generations of lab mice that are afraid of cherry blossoms. And this is very, very powerful because for so long, science has believed that we didn't have control, that we were just given the cards we were dealt. But the fact is, that's not true. The cards you were dealt are just some of the cards. What if you could trade some cards in and get some new cards by changing the way you think? How would that make your life different? How could you get rid of the pain? How could you heal? How could you have more joy? How could you get rid of the blocks to prosperity, the blocks to great relationships? These are the things that are so powerful. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen with you, and I'm going to share another screen with you in just a moment. But tell me what you think about so far. Have you heard the science where actually what you think and feel winds deeply into your DNA? If you have, type boom. So I know that you heard me on that. So this is very, very powerful. With epigenetics and with what I'd be calling this is what the work is called family constellations. And basically, if you look at it, you typically have 2 parents, right? You have your mother and you have your father. Now, I'm going to share my screen on this, but I'm going to share it from a different computer. And I got to join the meeting here real quick. Bear with me. But what I want you to do is pay close attention to this because this is very powerful. Let's see. Okay, I'm joining, and I'm going to just set up. This is supposed to be joined, but I had a little error on the other computer actually. Let me shut off my volume so I'm going to have feedback. I'm going to shut off my camera, and I'm going to share my screen. And we're going to go into some notes here. All right, you should be seeing the screen coming up on your computer in just a moment. So what you see here is like my little drawing, and you can see why I flunked kindergarten. But here's the thing. Let me go to a different one real quick here. Actually, I'll do it down here. So most of us were born, and maybe you had your mom and dad that were together. My mom and dad were together for 4 years during my birth, and then they got divorced. But needless to say, I was born, so that's a good thing. So you have your mom, right? Here, we'll put a dress on her, and then you have your dad. Now, here's the thing. We know that the male produces the sperm. Now, the thing that's different is the male, when they're producing sperm, the male actually is always going to be creating sperm. So basically what we have is a new creation process. So every time, every so often, the man will create new sperm, right? So it's always being replenished. So that means that there's always new sources. So the genetic code comes in, but it doesn't have the epigenetics assigned to it yet. So if you think of the sperm being made up of two codes, one code is the genetics from our ancestors of our physical area, the potential triggers for disease, which part of the world we were from, what kind of, how big we'll be, how small we'll be, if we'll be more muscular. Those are all programmed in. So number one would be the genetics is programmed into us, right? Those are just the standard genetics. But number two, it comes in, it's fresh, it doesn't have number two yet. Number two is the epigenetics. So the epigenetics is the actual program, and that comes down to the way that you feel and the way that you think. So if you're spending your day as a man with a lot of anger inside of you, and you are producing new sperm, and you're dwelling on anger, what you're doing then is energizing the sperm with angry genes, with maybe fear, whatever, and you're programming that in a certain state, a certain way of being, a certain personality trait. And what that does is it adds to number two. So now your little sperm there is programmed with one and with two. And what happens is when it actually goes out to create new life, you're putting in codes into the DNA to create the same process in the ancestors. Now, when I was younger, I was a radical Christian. I mean, I was a Catholic until 12 years old. At 12 years old, I was so burnt out with my life. I was miserable, and I was looking for love, and I became a born-again Christian on television, some evangelist. And during that time, I read the Bible constantly, and I remember a scripture in there that said, the sins of the father will be passed to the sons and to the daughters. I don't remember the scripture exactly, but I think you've heard that before too. Now, this is powerful because what's happening is genetically, the sins of the father are the dwelling, the envy, all these things where our minds get surrounded with our ego, and we suck into this state and we create these feelings, and we pass that on several generations. That is genetically encoded in us. That was not just some prophecy or some scripture. That is actually a scientific fact. And you just saw the evidence. Now, this is amazing because at the same point, we can go ahead and say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this negative, and I'm going to add to this, this program. I'm going to add compassion. And I'm going to start to realize that compassion is a birthright. I'm going to start to add love and joy. Now think of this. You're adding compassion, and now this number two reprograms the genes in the cell of the sperm, and the sperm now carries a new message to create life with a different state in your ancestors, with your daughter, with your son. That is very powerful. Now here's the interesting thing about the female. The female is very different because the female does not reproduce her eggs. The genetic material goes back several generations, back to mom and to grandmom. So all the way back, 3 generations back, these little eggs that mom carries, those little eggs have been in the system being programmed. So not only genetically, we already talked about that, but we're talking about the epigenetics. So think this through. Even if you didn't know your grandmother or your great-grandmother, you go back a couple generations, and what you're going to see is that if they had trauma back here, let's say great-grandma, she had a hard time. Maybe she came from the Depression era, and she lived with no money. And she struggled every day to pay the bills. And she was so afraid of life. So what happens is that program from grandmom is being updated in the DNA patterns of her eggs. And then when she has her baby, that baby, your mom, would be actually programmed already to have a lot of the suffering that's going on. Now, obviously, what will happen when you're programmed, reactions, the environment's going to throw things at you. They're triggers. And every time that mom, and I'll put a head on mom there, every time mom gets triggered, she feels a certain thing and she gets really caught up in it, and she doesn't even know why, but it just overtakes her. It's because it comes from her mother, and she's feeling the same fears, the same pain, the same anger that happened in the Depression in 1929. That is exactly what happens. Now, when your mom has you, you have these same eggs, right? Now, it seems like you're doomed, but I want you to understand, and it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, it's the same. But now, a lot of times when you're feeling blue, when you're feeling these emotions, you're not even feeling your pain. Think that through. You're not even feeling your pain. You're feeling grandmother's pain. You're feeling grandmother's pain. And so now you realize that we are not separate. We are one. And I'm going to show you that even further. The good news is you can reprogram this. Today, science is showing we can take these eggs that have all this fear, this pain that's causing blocks in your wealth, blocks in your health, blocks in your relationship, blocks just in your well-being. We can take those and we can start to change those. We can start to rewrite the code of the DNA. So let me pause for a moment and ask you, what do you feel right now is the biggest takeaway? What's the biggest benefit you've learned so far? What's something that's like a boom for you? In fact, type it in right now, type in boom, and then explain to me what you think that means for you, or what that makes you feel like. How does that make you feel knowing that potentially some of the pain, some of the suffering that you're carrying that comes up time and time again that you can't seem to figure out is not even yours. It's your family's. And it's coming up in you, just like the Bible said, through several generations, the sins of the father. That is just movement through. Now, let me show you this. This is pretty powerful. So I'm going to erase down here real quick. All right. So I drew this. This is my DNA code, by the way. So let me go back up here, and I'm going to demonstrate this. Let me do a different color. I'm going to do orange. Okay, so consider this the DNA. All right, so everybody knows the DNA is our building block of life. It holds the code of life. And we've been able to sequence the DNA. It used to cost $1 million. Now you can get it done for $99. But this is very powerful. It's scary in one sense because those that have power, if they seize control of this, they can do a lot of things by reprogramming the DNA. You can actually go in and reprogram this to get rid of diseases while the baby is in infant state in the mother. There's a company called CRISPR that does this on the stock market. So I'm going off track, but I want to keep you on point. So here's the thing, the DNA, what if you're not separate? This is you, right? But what if you're not separate? What if the truth is, this is you, of course, but you know what this is? This is your mother. I'm just going to use mother, but keep in mind, it works the same from your father over on this side. A little bit different with your father because he has sperm that's being reproduced, so it's a little bit less intense on the programming on the past trauma. But for your mother, it's for sure. And this is grandmom right here. So look at grandmom. She's back there. So now we have 2 generations, right? 1, 2 back. I don't know how far it goes, and they're still finding this out, but potentially It could go back much further, where we have way back here. I have ancestors in my family tree that I don't even know. I've heard that we have horse thieves. We've had all kinds of things. So what if somebody way back, just a couple generations ago was miserable? What if they were a killer? What if they had secrets of darkness and they sat in this state of low energy? Now, if we talk about elevation of frequency, we know that areas like shame vibrate at 20 hertz. I think it's hertz or megahertz, but it's on the low scale. We know that things like guilt and blame, these are the lowest scale of vibration. If they're operating in these areas, what they're doing is the DNA that they had is being marinated day in, day out in this low energy of shame, blame, and guilt. And what happens now is they actually, once they start to have offspring, they move that genetic code right down. But again, the genetics already there, but they're using the epigenetics, the way they think and feel, and they're programming that into their lineage. And the lineage now starts to pass it on without even knowing it. Just like a virus in the computer, there's no difference. And if you don't heal it, if you don't heal the work for you, like when I'm working with my clients, the whole goal is to heal. The whole goal is to rewrite their programs, to go inside, to work on the deeper dimensions, to help them change their lives, to realize the potential that they have. There's a program inside of every human being, but most of them are very virused. But once they understand how to reprogram, upgrade, then we move to being present. And the more present you are, the more opportunity shows up. The more present you are, the more life becomes amazing. The people come into your life, the right people. Doesn't matter about circumstance. Then number 3 is possibility. Once you're present, all the possibilities in the field of possibilities open up. Those are my 3 keys: presence, programs, presence, and possibility. But look at this. If you don't change it, you're going to pass that on to your kids, your little babies. And they're going to pass it on to their kids. Not only yours, but they're going to pass on their own traumas. And now we're building this big bridge of egoic constructs that are very bad structures. Now, type in, if this makes sense to you, type in, this makes sense. Because I want to bring you to the understanding that we are not our own. We are a community. We are a people. And I'm sure if we trace this back, all of us can see our DNA is one. There's just one big code. So if you think of it like a computer, and this is all we're doing today, all that's happening outside of us in this world is people without consciousness who are operating on brain alone, which is a good thing if you use it through consciousness. A bad thing if you don't, because we don't have the enlightenment to manage what we're creating, which become deadly. Artificial intelligence and weapons of mass destruction. These are things out of the brain with no conscious behind them. Higher levels that probably exist all over the entire universe don't operate that way. They operate out of love, compassion, and peace. So think about this. Here's a computer. Oh, let me get rid of that. Think about this. So we have a computer right here. I guess I'll make it red. I was going to do black. So this is the hardware. This is like your body, right? And you can tap into here on your keyboard every day, whatever you want to think. And then it's going to show up on the screen of your life. It's going to show up every day as a temperament, a mood, a state. But there's different levels. So it moves from maybe a bad day to a bad several days to a temperament. When you move to temperament, it's embedded in you. And now what you've done with your body, with your mind complex, you've actually uploaded your traumas, your epigenetics to the cloud. Now, if you remember the cloud in the internet, we know that we store data up here, right? This is where the human race stores their data. It's the conscious field. It's the, some call it the Akashic records. Basically, it is all things ever done are known. They're already recorded. And I can tell you, I've experienced it. If you want to ask me how, and I'll DM you on this. But we are uploading all the time, good and bad. But imagine this, you're uploading, downloading, and along that, you have viruses. So there are viruses that we create with our egoic mind. And those egoic minds out of consciousness, 5% of our day we're conscious, 95% of the day we're creating very negative patterns. And if we sit in that with a lot of energy around low frequency emotions, we're uploading this negative and this fear. So the reason that you see that we are one, though, is this, that we have our family and we're connected. Okay. So if we're connected, I know that I was born from my mom, but I'm made of the cells that my mom created and programmed. My father did the same. So these two mix their genetics, their cells, right? Two different DNA lines. They'll all probably go back to the exact same line for creation. And what happens is we have now two genetic cells that move into me, but both of them bring into the system their own traumas. So trauma, my dad had a lot of trauma. My mom had tremendous trauma. So all this trauma around my mom, the trauma around my dad, guess where it goes? It goes to me. And now I'm walking around